Hey, what's up, Weekend Warriors, and welcome back to another episode of Weekend Dojo. Sorry, it's kind of towards the middle of the week this week. We had some difficulty over the weekend. Tonight, uh, tonight, we're talking AC/DC, and it's gonna be me, El Chizo,
Ace Red.
and uh, so I figured tonight we'll start off pretty simple. We'll talk about how the band kind of got together because it really is kind of an interesting story. Something a lot of people don't realize is Angus and Malcolm Young, the two guitarists of AC/DC, their sister had a lot more to do with their beginnings than anyone else. Really
Really?
gives well, I guess I should say she had more to do with it than people should actually give her credit for, because a lot of people don't really mention her that much. Um, See, Malcolm Young was in a band already. Uh, he had not graduated school yet. He was very much, just Malcolm. Angus had not graduated school yet. Malcolm had. Malcolm would go out like once a week with the rest of his bandmates to practice. And it's said that Angus, had just gotten out of school when they started, but while he was still in school, Malcolm's friends would come to pick him up, and Angus would always have to show him what he was learning on guitar because he was learning at the time. And he would always play lead. He would never play a chord. And when he did, it was always like some of the most basic stuff that any music teacher will show you.
What year was this?
Oh, this had to be way back, like I want to say the late '60s.
Late 60s. Okay.
Although that could be wrong. It could be early '70s because that's kind of when they hit the scene.
hmm
And well, when Angus graduated high school, Malcolm's like, "Well, hey, do you want to join this band I'm putting together?" And Angus was like, "Sure." And their sister, but it's like, how do I kind of show? It's going to be kind of weird seeing one little kid hang out with one short stack kind of kid hang out with a bunch of grown ass looking men. And because he had just graduated school, his sister was like, "Well, you've still got your school uniform. Why don't you wear that? It'll be something cool and different." And so that's what he ended up doing, and that's why he wears the schoolboy uniform that you know today. And
Uh-huh.
he likes wearing that because it kind of lets him let out the imp, lets him be childish and kind of throw a guitar tantrum around the stage, and he would
Yeah.
like run in circles on the floor.
hmm
Um, as far as their name goes, that was their sister too. Uh, you see, the young sister, uh, Angus and Malcolm Young's sister, got the idea for the name of their band off of the side of a sewing machine.
I heard about that.
And
Just AC/DC on it, right? Like, was the code?
yeah, it wasn't a code. It was like a switch on the side of it to switch from alternating current or direct current power supply.
Okay, so AC/DC is and that's why they have like the lightning bolt in the center.
Yeah, because they're electric.
Yeah.
Um, and then Bon Scott was actually their driver for a while, and they asked him if he wanted to join up, and he said sure. And they started getting pretty popular, kept traveling around, and Bon Scott actually left his fiance to be with the band.
Hmm.
And he loved it. And on the topic of Bon Scott, there's a common misconception that he died of alcohol poisoning. This is not true.
He died of his
Uh,
vomit, right?
yeah, see, essentially, now Bon Scott was not actually a big drinker, but one night he happened to be drinking more than he usually did. He got a little drunker, and the guy who drove him home, unfortunately, was drunk too.
Mm.
And somehow they got him home, and the driver took Bon inside and propped him up on the couch, but he propped him up in the wrong position, and he puked in his sleep, and it couldn't get clear of his throat.
No one was charged with murder, though, right?
I don't know. I don't think so
Like it
because it
was
was not.
openly agreed that it was just an accident.
Yeah, that's really the only way you could construe it. And after Bon Scott died, they were like, okay, well, we'll go on hiatus for a little bit, but we need to find a new singer. And so eventually they heard about this guy, Brian Johnson, who was kind of part of the crew. And they're like, he can kind of sing. And the guys around the AC/DC crew were saying, yeah, he can sing pretty good. And it's like, all right, well, we'll bring him in for an audition. And so the day of the audition, they were waiting for him and waiting for him. And the clock keeps ticking. It's like, well, where the hell is this guy? And someone comes in and knocks at the door. It's like, hey, there's a Scottish guy down here hustling pool with the rest of the roadies. Is this the guy you're looking for? And they go down there, and sure enough, it's Bon Scott. And
Bon
that's
Scott,
kind
I
of
thought he's dead already. By this
no, sorry, not Bon Scott, Brian Johnson.
Brian Johnson. Okay.
Bleh. Sorry. Um, and the history of the band kind of keeps they've swapped over drummers and bassists and so on and so forth, and that they've had them in and out. But the two that have always been around have been Angus and Malcolm Young. They even changed singers once, and I don't know what they're going to do pretty soon because Brian Johnson's going deaf,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, that's kind of the history of it's been a ride, man.
Mm-hmm.
So since we've kind of covered the history of the band and I've yammered on for a good bit, let's talk about some of their lesser known albums, or at least when people think of AC/DC, they don't think of these. And the first two to me that spring to mind are Razor's Edge
Mm-hmm.
from in the 90s and Fly on the Wall.
Well, you know my favorite song is on the Razor's Edge album.
Oh, yeah. Money Talks and Razor's. It's all.
Well, my favorite is Thunderstruck.
Well, Thunderstruck's always good, but that's the thing about AC/DC albums is you don't just. Yeah, you've got your favorites off of it, but you don't listen to just the favorites on the album.
Right.
It's one of those things where you put you crank the stereo or you put your headphones on and that's your evening.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, since you got me the Razor's Edge album, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually looking for a new stereo, so I'm gonna go to a thrift store soon and get
awesome.
One. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, stereo will work just fine. If you're a hi-fi head like me, it gets expensive. So Fly on the Wall, as far as the Razor's Edge in the 90s was part of I think it's when they really started to experiment with changing stuff in their sound. Money Talks.
I noticed the singer they had at the time, or they still have.
Yeah.
It's intentional that he sounded like Bon Scott, right?
No. Brian Johnson.
Well, Brian Johnson sounded like Bon Scott if you compare the voice between Highway to Hell. And
there is a similarity, but let me put it to you this way. See, Bon Scott, he had that really high register out of his chest. Brian Johnson had a head voice. That's where he sang from mostly, was from his head.
Mm-hmm.
So Bon Scott had more power behind his voice for sure, but I find that Brian Johnson, his voice was more piercing.
Mm-hmm. But if you notice, I don't think it's a coincidence that their voices sound similar. I think.
Oh, absolutely not. They have a very similar register.
I think that the replacement for Bon Scott, again, I keep forgetting his name.
Brian Johnson.
I think Brian Johnson was chosen. One of the biggest reasons he was chosen was for his voice.
Well, one of the first things he said to him when he signed on was that he was no Bon Scott. And it could be that he was trying a little bit to sound like Bon Scott, but ultimately he kind of ended up sounding, well, kind of got his own sound. And
Hmm.
I
I don't know.
mostly
'Cause before I knew Bon Scott had died and that was Brian Johnson, I couldn't tell the difference between. I thought it was the same voice doing Highway to Hell was the same one doing Thunderstruck and all those.
oh yeah, that's kind of the thing a lot of people and this is something to know if you're going to get into rock and roll, because this is like rock and roll 101, is you kind of have to listen not just to the tone of voice, but inflection, the way they're singing.
Hmm.
Because, like, Bon Scott will kind of saunter up here and then he'll saunter back down here, and he's got these runs that they dance. But Brian Johnson, he seems to just pitch it in your face.
Hmm. That's hard to tell, though. I mean, like the casual listener would assume that it's the same voice from the very first song, the most current.
Maybe, but that's why we're doing rock talk here. This rock
Yeah.
month thing is just to like learn to listen.
Hmm.
So, well, I guess the best way to put it is Bon Scott was definitely going for a little more of a seductive kind of voice,
Probably.
but Brian Johnson, he was just yelling at that microphone, man. And like I said again, I mean, we lost Malcolm just a few years ago, and Brian Johnson, I don't know how he still does it, because he was having hearing problems from the beginning and he's going deaf now.
Mm.
And Angus, well, he just can't move around the stage like he used to.
Hmm.
Oh, that's another thing. Now, longtime fans of AC/DC will know that Rock or Bust came out just a few years ago. That was the last album that Malcolm wrote for. He didn't perform on it, but it is definitely a fun listen. I recommend anyone go check it out. It's when you hear Angus play on it, you can definitely tell it's still that Angus Young hot rod guitar sensibility. Excuse me, but it's slowed down a little bit, not in a bad way though. It's like it's aged like fine wine or like really good cheese. I don't know if that's a good analogy. Um, but yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about AC/DC for a minute. I guess we'll talk about our favorite hits by them and then go into a quick little guitar lesson.
You go first.
My absolute favorite song by AC/DC would have to be off of well, the Highway to Hell album. I know but Night Prowler.
Okay, what do you like about Nightcrawler?
Well, not only just the fact that it sounds really good and you get to hear like Bon Scott just drag out that growly tone of voice,
Hmm.
but the history of the song is kind of interesting because that song hit the radios just around the same time as a kind of a huge wave of serial killings was going on.
Really?
Oh yeah, they started calling him the Night Prowler, and AC/DC was like, "Oh no, this," because like you cannot ask for worse timing. And of course, it's still kind of tragic, but there's like I've got this morbid fascination with it.
Hmm. For me, my favorite is separated into singer. So favorite by Bon Scott is Highway to Hell, and favorite by Brian
Brian
Johnson.
Johnson.
Yeah, Brian Johnson is Thunderstruck.
Oh, if we're doing singer, then my favorite Brian Johnson one would have to be Money Talks off of Razor's Edge from the 90s.
Hmm.
He started doing something from that point that I really liked. It's where we really started to hear that grind in his voice, that really cool growl.
Mm-hmm. Also, near the end of this, for like the last 15 minutes when we do some free talk, I want to go discuss Queen a bit. Just to let you know.
But yeah, we can talk Queen.
Cool.
Well, while we're at it, let's just go over the guitar lesson because we can get this done real quick. We're just going to focus on the right hand a little bit today.
All right.
Grab the guitar and get something kind of solid to sit on so that you're sitting up straight.
I don't know if I can be very loud though, because I'm the only one awake.
Ah, okay. Well, we'll just pluck light, and this is actually good exercise. So when you're plucking, look down at your string, right? Like if you're holding your guitar like this and you look at your string, think of the fretboard as the bottom and anything up here as the top. And you're just you're using the top half of that string. Okay, so quick going over the chords one more time. So A, which is here and here. Well, it's not really A, it's kind of an A suspended fifth, but we're going to call it an A. And you're going to strum from this string right here, the second from the lowest. So and so it's, remember the teeter-totter. All right, so those are the chords. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to bring this down here for a second because we're going to focus on the right hand technique. And I remember last week you were asking me how I get the guitar to stop ringing. So let's see if I can arrange this in such a way that you can get a good view here. But watch my hand here, my right hand. So I'm not using a lot of this, I'm just using my wrist. Like I'm brushing it off.
What?
Okay, watch me here. Watch this. I'm going to do it kind of slowly. Not touching, not touching, not touching, not touching. Then I touch.
Like this?
Yeah, think of it moving like this. You're hanging off the string, you twist out, and then you come back and close down on the string. And I know it sounds cheesy and cliche, and you've probably heard it a million other places, but it is all in the wrist. If it helps, imagine it like this. So I swing out and back, out and back.
And it's gonna take me a bit to get used to.
Yep, it's a little tricky, but it's something that it's pretty basic. It's one of the few things you kind of need to know to start moving forward in guitar. So what I think of is like I set the tip of my pick against the string I want to start strumming on. In this case, it's the A string. And without touching the strings, I strum, and then I come back. Like I'm turning a key.
All right.
Okay, so give it a try.
Oh. How's that?
You're getting there. It's and it will take practice. It is not something that anyone is good at when they start.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be repetition, repetition, repetition. It's, you know, just.
Ow, my arm hurts.
Are you sitting on something kind of solid so you can stand, kind of keep your back straight?
Yeah, I need to put my guitar down.
Yep. Okay. Well, like I said, just practice that. Let me put this away. Posture is kind of key to preventing that.
All right.
And I know that sounds like a fuddy-duddy because everyone likes to picture the blues guy hunched over his guitar, but just remember, you should be able to kind of keep your back straight, and your guitar should come up to about here.
All right. We're going to
All
open
right.
now.
Yeah, let's do a little talk. You said you wanted to talk about Queen.
Yes, the movie coming out called Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yes, I really want to go see that.
Mm-hmm. There was a clip. There's a clip. I was watching movie clips from it. There's a clip where they were talking about how they developed the beat to "We Will Rock You," and it was imagine we want to develop a beat that the audience can feel like they're playing to. So then that's when they started doing.
And here's the thing. I couldn't tell if the person that was developing the beat was supposed to be Freddie or James.
In the clip, or?
In the clip, yeah, because Freddie Mercury is the singer, but James Bay was the guitarist.
Mm-hmm.
And he did some of the writing for the band.
I'll have to look again, because I know supposedly some people are complaining, nitpicking that he didn't have that mustache during the time period or something like that.
Oh yeah. He didn't, and I'm just that's what I'm trying to think that's why I got confused, because it could have been James Bay. By the way, anyone out there wanting to purchase a James Bay signature guitar, too bad, because there's only one in the world like it, and James Bay owns it. He and his dad made it.
Ooh.
But yeah,
is he alive still?
No, I think he passed.
What happened to the guitar? Museum?
I think it's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Which, by the way, I want to go see.
Same.
Do
they have concerts there?
Oh, dude, all the time. See, I used to live
Virtual
in Ohio.
Concerts?
I used to live in Ohio, but they do have concerts there. I never got to actually go to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a kid, and not until after I moved.
Do you know if they have like virtual concerts there, where like you go into like a theater room and it's made to emulate an actual rock concert? It's a rock museum, so they would have something like that at least.
It'd be worth looking up on their website, and if not, I'm sure they could Imagineer something up like it.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I thought these were dead. What the hell is this doing here?
Dead meme alert.
I'm gonna have to sanitize my hands. Anyway,
it could be worse. You could have this.
Fair enough. But let's see. So, yeah, I want to go see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For those who don't know, James Bay's guitar was essentially made from scraps. And I was going to save this for next week because it would be a legendary guitar night, but I figure we'll just talk about it real quickly right here. The neck of that guitar was actually made from an antique mantle that someone was going to throw away.
Ooh, really?
A fireplace mantle. and the body was made from an old table. And then the tremolo system, the bridge, was actually made using motorcycle parts.
Oh, cool.
And they spent months just trying to get that guitar to sound the way it sounded. And yes, okay, everyone thinks of Queen and they think, we will, we will. And they think, you know, Bohemian Rhapsody. Yeah, so that's, everyone thinks of those songs. But one of my favorite songs off of News of the World was Sleeping on the Sidewalk, and James Bay actually sings that one.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents on Queen. I love Queen.
Question was, did Queen, were they trying to go for kind of like that barbershop quartet kind of sound with them?
No, as I understand it, they were trying to be a blues band, but Freddie just has this voice about him, man.
Because we notice when they sing, they all do the lyrics at once, and it goes.
Oh, they harmonize. Yes. Well, that's not just a barbershop thing. It was definitely heavily adopted by barbershop quartet.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about Queen is that they are all very good singers, and they just capitalize on that.
Okay.
I think Freddie definitely had probably the most impressive voice, but
wasn't he the lead?
Yeah. And he really was an impressive singer.
Didn't he die of like drugs?
As I understood it, he died of an STD.
Ooh, okay. Well, he went out doing what he loved, I guess.
Yeah, at the time, they had very little idea how to protect against it. But, you know, he was an amazing singer. If nothing else, he was a huge sensation with some of the most powerful lyrics that have ever been written in the world of rock and roll.
Mm-hmm.
And so Queen will always have a special place in my heart. It's a kick-ass band.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, rock on.
I agree. You got any rock and roll quotes of knowledge to end the night?
Well, obviously there's the first couple of rules of rock and roll. First rule is, fuck the man.
I'd say it, but it's more enjoyable when you say it. So
fair enough. And the second rule is, well, it's blues. The blues is, well, people think of it as a genre or the father of rock and roll. But long story short, the blues is a good man feeling bad. You learn a blues scale, and you can just make the blues happen.
Wouldn't Louis Armstrong count as like one of the earlier blues artists?
He was more of a jazz trumpeter.
Yeah, well, he did jazz, yeah, but like if you listen to some of his music, it gives off that blues vibe.
Well, yeah, it's actually blues and jazz definitely share a very strong history because they're both traditional American music.
Mm-hmm.
Although I believe Louis Armstrong used a 7-note scale.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, but I believe he used a 7-note scale.
I'll look it up later.
And with guitar, the most common scale out there is a 5-note scale, a pentatonic scale. That's what everyone likes to use.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into that later on in guitar lessons if everyone's still interested in doing them. I know I'm going to get to them with you.
Yeah. This weekend is a no-go because Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I may get home early on Sunday, but this weekend I'll be out of town, and then next weekend I'll be at a convention.
Okie doke. Anyway, I think that's a good point to wrap it up with. Yeah,
I think so. So with that said, thank you all for watching, and who will be watching when this is up as a video. All I have to say is stay more phenomenal, everybody.
See you later, Weekend Warriors.